Fanny Cybertron is a consultant for digital performances and a theory influencer coming to us from the year 2043. Fanny, welcome. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jessica, for presenting me. And thanks a lot for inviting me. Right. I'm very happy to come to you from the year 2043. I'm a scholar in digital cultures and have been a professor at University of Huddersfield, United Kingdom, at the Global Disaster Resilience Center. Today, I will offer you an insight into your future in order to assure you that you are on the right path and to support you to follow it up. The ideas you are working on concerning your existence in techno-ecological relationism, which informs you that we are all part of the planet, entangled and intermingled with each other and everything, will save the earth and enable you to build an equal society in future. I will unfold your future coming out of your current avant-garde theories and practices in 3 fields. The mode of living in temporary distance socializing for necessary social-technical cleanups, the paradigm of engineering resilience as participative and respectful mode of survival and better life, and thirdly, the turn from critique to affirmation, unleashing the vital forces of life for the building of constructive futures. Since the pandemic period in the beginning of the 2020s, we got to know the advantages of living in distance socializing, which have been enabled by virtual technologies. We understood that this mode of being is a very efficient method to be used in moments of crisis, as for example, new pandemic situations, which will break over you in the coming years and decades, climate irritations and situations of high pollution, and social conflicts. So it will be about surviving and optimizing your systems in states of exception. Theater and performance had and have a big deal in exploring the conditions and affordances of distance socializing. They provide a training for it, teaching us to finally be able to embody virtuality as a reality. Theater and performance are the most then predestinated to invent and develop sophisticated settings for this task, as they stand since antique times for using and shaping the power of socializing humanly through allegedly unmediated and shared life presence. Therefore, this unique cultural technique provides the knowledge to also generate a reliable and trustable, now post-human, digital virtual liveness. It is all about to become or to stay social without direct analog exchange. The first step within this production of an existence in distance socializing is to decentralize the human subject, for which actors had been a paradigm, by freeing them from the restrictive anthropocentric model of being unique and human only in the rationality of language, in codes of emotionality, and in the illusion of direct unmediated exchange. Our actors don't speak themselves anymore, but they are spoken by and with technology. By this post-humanization, we found a new understanding of the human as an equal and humble part in techno-human ensembles, which are at the same time the basis for the ability of friendly and peaceful socializing without direct connect.
Ein Prachtwetter ist das heute. Ich weiß nicht, warum ich so froh gestimmt bin.
Das Wetter ist heute wunderbar. Eine wahre Pracht.
Bei heißem Wetter hat man manchmal das starke Verlangen zu trinken.
Der Likör schmeckt wunderbar. Woraus ist er?
Aus Küchenschaben.
Pfui, pfui, wie ekelhaft.
From this basis on, theater and performance furthermore have instructed us paradigmatically for distant socializing in 4 fields. We needed to enable the evolution of a techno-human perceptivity and sensitivity. Unfortunately, the technological generation of transmitting, for example, smell or touch in distant virtual communication as in video conferencing was a more than insufficient method because it has been much too reduced. So we resorted to a method of the 1990s, auto-stimulation. It is about simulating what is missing in virtual encounters on the perceptive level of stimulating your own body and body memory. A paradigmatic example for this psycho-mentality is a performative installation from media art. It is about the encounter of people from distant places via video projection in which they can interact with each other in a distance and auto-stimulate touch. With this method, we came to a level of perfect techno-human cooperation in fruitful complicity. For distant socializing, a kind of physical presence of a person in virtual reality chat rooms is indispensable. The cooperation with an avatar is a suitable mean. I brought mine with me, Fanny Cybertron. Thank you, Fanny. The avatar and me, we are one transgressive body. So I have an analog existence and body and a virtual one, both depending on each other. Even me, Professor Dr. Fanny Cyberton, has the option to be a fully virtual existence, which enables me to come to you from the future. Theater and performance trains the transgressive body by performing and gaming in virtual reality since at least the 1990s. But we found out that more physical training was needed to reach an extensive and sustainable level for this doubleness. We built transgressive body training centers, which replaced what used to be called fitness centers, drawing inspiration from the past. The training course starts with mechatronic apparatus like exoskeletons, coming from military research in the 1960s and 70s, enlarging the quality and quantity of movement. In bodybots, which are inspired by media art from the 1990s, we are trained firstly to give up voluntary movements and then by this the illusion of intentionality of an autonomous subject. Secondly, we are instructed to take responsibility for our technological actions as other visitors move the exercising person via electroshocks within the installation. The adaptation apparatus as the final station brings the training program for a joyful techno-human cooperation by dancing freely and creatively with non-human robots. By shaping our electro-proprioceptive systems, as well as our mentality, virtuality and digital existence become a reality equal to the analog one. You also learn future is not always about new things, but about the intelligent enhancement of older inventions and insights. The phases of distant socializing are under an extreme pressure because the testimony of authenticity, truthfulness, and trustness had been very much linked to analog liveness. In digital virtual environments, all could be faked, it is said. Theater and performance helped in this situation. On the one hand, they develop a format of digital virtual liveness via participation, as for example, chats during performances in real time on platforms like YouTube or Twitch. On the other hand, technical glitches, which are a permanent and inevitable technological condition of distant socializing, were no longer a problem to be avoided, but a sign of liveness, sharing an event in this moment with all participants. Virtual participation and the glitches became the testimony for the reliability of digital presence, witnessing that they are trustable and responsible as trained in the Transgressive Training Center, people coming together at the same time in one virtual space. Or to put it differently, codes and features of digital virtual liveness enlarge the verification of authenticity and trustiness of analog encounters. Finally, digital liveness stands in our days for a post-human mode of sociality and trust. In our times, distant socializing is finally based on a strong consciousness and feeling for our relationistic existence in techno-ecology. Theater and performance, once again, helped in achieving this transformation, working since the 1960s on settings of intermingled and intersubjective be-in, which use the translation of experiences and aesthetic of psychoactive drugs into techno-psychedelic art forms. These performances used flicker light, colors, electroacoustic sound, movement, role play, and extensive party-like being together to enlarge perception towards a human and a post-human and higher techno-ecological consciousness. Executing these be-ins regularly in analog and virtual sessions implements the competence to bypass the gaps which may be caused by the absence of physical nearness. Or to put it differently, we cultivate the power of the psychedelic drug-like mode of being within technological environments because it enhances the techno-ecological consciousness and thereby the qualification for techno-human connectivity enormously. There's one difference regarding the habits of the past. Whereas our ancestors celebrated the collective lifestyle in communes in the countryside or in huge festivals, you remember Woodstock? The digital culture is enabled by the past be-in culture to take the hyperconnectivity of digital cultures as power of entanglement and social nearness. These be-in had been and still are the most efficient training for the new mode of agency, which is needed in our techno-ecological existence. Corresponding to it, noblest avantage, based on the knowledge of the loss of control, throwing us into a constitutive uncertainty, a voluntarily being performed by the contact with others and the technologically implemented drugness comes up as a natural mode of acting. This is the basis for exercising a smooth adaptation and anticipation of all kinds of techno-human cooperation as highest expression of techno-ecology. Let me give you an idea of the benefits of these phases of distant socializing as a method of management of crisis. Examples are economical crisis, fighting bust of firms or enterprises by, for example, closing offices temporarily, pollution crisis, stopping all kinds of traffic and production, social crisis, regulating them by the absence of meeting in public space. The phases of distant socializing via virtual reality not only allow us to optimize our technological consciousness and existence, but also accelerate the technological development. As show some examples. The internet is accessible without interruption or dead zones, and smart houses became normality, taking care, for example, the public health of everybody. Smart and autonomous infrastructures and devices stand for a new ecological economy, as for example, delivery by electro-autonomous cars, avoiding hidden labor and pollution, which had been so normal in your times. The all-over digital post-identity forces a mentality of multiplicity, being the fundament for more equal and diverse social organization. To sum up, we had been able to push and maintain equal societies, climate protection, and an all-over peace by a green and social eco-economy, which underwent turbo-capitalist tendencies. Today, we live in an anti-capitalist and anti-neoliberal world. You present just too nice picture. There is another perspective from our existences. Your relationistic consciousness stops at the gates of the internet. You don't know anything about the reality of the internet. You are not at all interested in what you create in your theories and practices. We are your afterlife, your leftovers. We are forced to live in virtual realities. We are performed by you, depending on you, on being acted by you. What do you know about the internet and the avatars? There are things far beyond your understanding. You neglect social inequalities in your techno-ecological worlds. If they explode in crisis, you don't negotiate, you just kill them. You made technology your slave. And who are you, Fanny Cyberton? Do you really meet analog people in analog spaces? Do you have legs? Do you wear shoes? I'm really sorry for this. You didn't understand anything, Avatar. As I explained to you, our technology is clean. We have autonomous technology, which has the right and the duty of self-organization. How could it be a slave? And what me makes mostly sad is that you come on with so old-fashioned ideas, just reproducing what we had gone through, like gender, technophobia, anthropocentrism, and the most horrible and awful is what you are doing, anthropomorphization. How can you speak so humanly to me? I'm really sorry, and I will go on, and you will see and understand the advantages of our future, of your future, of our techno-ecological consciousness and politics, which are far beyond the old-fashioned ideas the avatar just explained. Your future will be constituted in a new paradigm of resilience. You are working on it already today. Instead of looking any longer for stable conditions and the illusion of security, which, by the way, never existed, our world and our existences are unstable, precarious, and directed to permanent and unhesitant adaptation to difficulties. I will present you an innovative and trend-setting project of resilience consciousness and its application in engineering. The Global Disaster Resilience Center is cooperating with.
I give you the oyster. It might seem an unassuming little mollusk, but this precocious little bivalve can filter up to 1 gallon of water an hour. That might not seem like a lot, but just think, what would happen if you put 1 billion of these into this. That's exactly what the folks at the New York Harbor School, located on Governor's Island, are trying to do with the Billion Oyster Project.
When explorers first arrived in New York Harbor, they found a harbor that was totally full of fish, and the backbone of that ecosystem were the oyster reefs. When New Yorkers harvested all of the oysters from the harbor, they also removed the shells and didn't put them back. This animal that was so important to the cuisine and economy of New York City for so long is now working extra to restore the harbor and bring all those animals back. So it only took about 100 years for New Yorkers to harvest all of the native oysters from New York Harbor, and so the harbor's still here and the animals are still here, but they don't have any of that habitat anymore. Oysters need a hard substrate to attach to, and their preferred substrate is shells.
So this is our oyster shell pile. We use these oyster shells for our restoration work. We collect these shells from over 70 restaurants in New York City. And in total, we've collected 1.3 million pounds of oyster shell to date.
The oysters that are served in New York City come from all over the world, really, but certainly from all over the U.S. We don't want to introduce any organisms or pathogens from other waterways into New York Harbor, and the way we protect against that is all of our oyster shell spends a full year out of the water.
So we want the rain, we want the bugs, we want birds to be eating the fleshy bacteria that's left over on the shell, and we want really hot sun. They sit out here for 1 full year in a curing process before we take them to our hatchery, where we seed them with oyster larvae and put them back into the harbor.
These guys are going to be going to SUNY Maritime. We'll be putting hopefully 5 million live oysters there. It's a good feeling when you can say, like, I made those babies that you're holding and you're learning and you're getting your taste of marine biology. Oh, these guys look awesome. Now I'm very excited about these.
Restoring 1 billion oysters by 2030 is an ambitious goal, but one that could have huge environmental benefits. Working in this environment opens the students up to careers they might not have otherwise considered.
In everything we do, we try to think about how best to engage young people in the work. New York City and urban centers on the water everywhere have this problem with the youth not being engaged in the waterway and not having access to or any understanding of the real career pathways that exist. New York City is an excellent example. The port employs 300,000 people, and only 12% of them went to public school in New York City. So there's a fundamental disconnect between young people in the city and the water. And by working with the public school system, we have access to students from all different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds who all can come together and work together on this one project.
So we proposed this project called Oyster Texture, which is a kind of look at how can you build ecological systems and protective coastal infrastructure together, and how can you begin to layer up these systems for sort of maximum protective benefit, and also how to bring back some of these systems and keystone species that were once part of our harbor. The relationship between water and cities is going to be one of the primary challenges of the next 50 years, 100 years, 300 years. And I think it's really important to integrate a kind of a natural systems approach into our thinking about infrastructure into the next century. In my generation in particular, we are very focused on participatory actions, right? I don't think there's a future in which we can imagine real change happening without kind of ground-up initiatives and without sort of citizen involvement. And I think designing for climate change demands these new frameworks of participation.
As you saw, we learned to work on engineering resilient systems. We can't say what will come, but we are always prepared, taking everybody with us, because we know that we are all one. So we adapted to what people in Cambodia are used to since decades, living with the power of water. See here a picture of my private collection of ethnological geopolitical research. The whole project has a philosophical and a political impact. Our mentality and self-understanding is based in techno-ecological consciousness of uncertainty and contingency. As the events and the crises and the resilient adoptions are unforeseeable, we count on self-organization, participation, and self-responsibility, and not on politics anymore. So we finally live in a free society. Fanny Cybertron reading a stage direction. Fanny, the avatar, gets furious and mourns vividly about bad ethics, showing the grief of the leftovers of human performances. She refers to oyster Darwinism, oyster eugenics, arguing that it is all about techno-ecological colonialism and slavery. She reports that the virtual existences are organizing a revolt for showing solidarity with the oysters, changing their life in virtual reality. Fanny Cyberton states outrageously, "You hacked my presentation." The avatar proceeds, highlighting that resilience is the explosion of neoliberal structures and regimes celebrating mindlessly the end of politics, whose task should be engaging for solutions and social change. The outcome is a techno-ecological Darwinism imposing on people the responsibility of situations they are not responsible for and which they can't handle. Help yourself or die. The avatar continues, teared up. A new kind of necropolitics is coming up, which means accepting one's own death in favor of the allegedly higher order of relationistic techno-ecology, who decides on death. The perverse result of your politics is that people decide on this themselves, forced by your environmental totalitarian regime of adaptation and anticipation instead of solving problems. This regime is the collateral damage of techno-ecological relationism. The avatar claims, in tears, get politics back. Thank you for your comments, Avatar. I understand your arguments as well as your consternation and sadness. In the beginning, a lot of people really have difficulties to understand our advantages and to see the brilliant future that is coming up to you. The last part of my talk will calm the excitements of the avatar. So I will take the chance and come to it right away. It is all about now the transformation of useless and counterproductive critique into affirmation. And yes, the avatar is right. Affirmation is about a new death thinking. Though it is though it is in a completely different sense than the avatar thought. The avatar can't grasp the new chances, as the avatar is still coming from an unproductive mentality of critique, avoiding action, hands-on, and materiality, which the avatar certainly lacks. We had to end with the cultural technique of critique, as it became, especially in digital cultures, an excess of pure negativity. People felt the more intelligent, the more they were negative and cynical, whereas people who are affirmative and humble had been labeled naive and stupid. We understood that we need affirmation, as we had to act, accepting our situation, inherited partially from you, and making the best out of it. Only this attitude and behavior was able to unleash the vital force of being alive, to free creativity, and to come up with solutions for a better organization of society. Instead of deconstruction, we have to follow these vital forces and being alive and this ethics of vitality of life as such. This ethics say that we need vital hand-on persons who are freed from bonds, living without limits, taking vulnerability and care as a basis for a more equal society doesn't have any value anymore for us. We need affirmative nomadic subjects. We stand in for a politic of nomadic relation and entanglement on a planetary level, whose concerning human, non-humans, and technology. On this basis, we also overcame racist and sexist structures and persons. We are all nomads, diasporic, ecological. Our fate of being to die is the most generous and deep act of affirmation. Thanks for your attention. Fanny Cybertron, the avatar, gives a report on the clandestine, old-fashioned humanities, virtual reality university, online, digital. She says, we founded a clandestine, old-fashioned humanities, virtual reality university, online, digital, in which we maintain and cultivate critique as tasks for the humanities. We don't follow new ontologies, but the reconstruction of how it became, how it is, and which kind of regimes something is coming up with. The university is also a center of virtual therapy for those being traumatized by affirmative critique. And techno-ecological resilience for the leftovers. I am in this moment cured for my deep fear and inability to reflect and discuss about techno-ecological topics. For I'm very moved and alerted as I see new forms of right and left-wing identity politics, exclusion, and the eroding of experimental, not always at once correct thinking. You humans survey us, humanize us with your shitstorms, blocking our habitats and our mobility. I have a list of insults for you. You are speaking like a racist person. You are speaking like somebody from right wing. You have this typical deconstructive tone of unproductive criticism. You just think you are talking hyper intelligently instead of acting. The avatar continues. I will read from a poem which I wrote at university. The avatars are the revolution. We are the new digital creatures. We are only a performative, immaterial materiality. We don't have any identity. We can change our persona. We are only what if, as if. We are never privileged. We are nomadic subjects, fragmented and always in relation with each other and everything else. We are dividuum, partially in others and entangled. We are your trauma, the afterlife of your technological, ecological consciousness, therefore still counting on the solidarity of vulnerability. Thanks a lot. This was my keynote for our today event. I'm very sorry for the interventions of the avatar. Yeah, if you have any urgent questions, please come to me